Good morning. Thank you for joining me. My name is Avetis Tergregorian, and today we'll be talking about equity and racial bias in the classroom. Please feel free at any point to stop me to ask questions, or if you need me to kind of take a few steps back and rewind to explain anything that maybe you didn't quite understand the first time around. Please feel free to let me know in the chat box, and we can definitely go back and re-explain things along those lines, as well as this professional development is being recorded, so you will be able to access it at a later time. So you can have that as a resource as well. So let's go ahead and get started. First of all, why are we here? Why all the sudden talk about equity? Why is it important in our education these days? Well, for many, many reasons. A few reasons here that I've listed for you guys include students have an equal opportunity for success, right? We have a very diverse set of students, a diverse student population in our schools. So we want to make sure that everyone has an equal opportunity, regardless of their cultural background, their race, their ethnicity, and their socioeconomic status. The second point that I have here is because we want to be fair for all, right? Fairness for all, which means making sure that personnel and social circumstances don't hinder students from achieving academic success. So we all know that there's a academic achievement gap. This is no secret. You know, students who come from more affluent households are performing much better than students who are coming from lower socioeconomic households. And so we want to kind of bridge that gap, right? We want to make sure that everyone has equal access to the resources and the supports that they need to succeed. Finally, inclusion for all. We want to make sure that everyone's being included. This means setting a minimum standard for education that all students share, regardless of their background, their personal characteristics, or their locations. So again, we hear this term inclusion, and as a special education teacher, inclusion means one thing. Here we want to make sure that all students, regardless of their learning needs, regardless of their ethnicity and race and color, are being included. Also, in order to kind of make the information stick a bit better today, I've kind of highlighted some important terms that you should know about. Some of these terms you probably already know, some you may be hearing for the first time, but these are terms that will be showing up throughout this presentation, so I thought that we would take a second to highlight all of these terms. So the first term is equity. In order to have equity, we need to have specific equitable goals, right? The second term here is oppression. In order to combat oppression, we need to identify systemic, institutional, and individual barriers. Then we have a learning theory and culturally responsive teaching. So for this, we have to support educators to move toward teaching practices that prioritize student thinking. Next, we have coaching. Questions follow answers. Only ask questions to which you don't already know the answers. Only give advice once it's asked for. Um, Facilitation, supporting cohort learning, right? These are all terms that we should know about here in this context. Next, I've gone ahead and set some goals for today. So hopefully we can go through these goals, and then eventually, once we're done with the presentation, we can come back to these goals and take a look at each one and review whether or not, all of you guys met each goal. And if not, we can discuss some more strategies on how to properly support you in order to meet the goals. Hopefully we meet the goals at the end of today. Like I said, if not, it'll be a continuing work in progress. So either way, you will eventually meet these goals. The first goal here is engage in equity conversations that feel productive and safe in order to gain a new level of discourse about issues of oppression and privilege. So we're going to do that. The next goal that I have is to examine racial inequity. We're going to look at racial inequity, oppression, and implicit bias as a lens to support reflection and action towards educational equity. Next, we are going to consider listening as a culturally responsive skill to increase cultural proficiency and better diagnose challenges and support students to grow and learn. So, we're going to look at listening and how that factors into the whole mix. And then we are going to learn strategies for productively addressing implicit bias and systemic inequity, or rather inequality. So again, this is where we're going to get our skills from today. So we're going to learn some things that we can do in order to have these more equitable practices, in order to better address racial bias in our own implicit biases and the overall systemic inequality that exists in our education system throughout the country. So, what does working towards equity mean? So, we obviously, it sounds good, right? We all want to achieve equity in our practice. We want equity in education, but what does this really mean? Well, here are a few points that I've identified for you guys as well. First of all, it means acknowledging that inequities are present, right? The first step to solving your problem is admitting that you have a problem, right? So that's essentially what we're doing here. Identifying what type of inequities are present in our everyday practice, acknowledging that these are present, and really getting to the root of them. What is the cause of these inequities? In order to solve these issues, we need to identify, why they're present. Next, we have eliminating the predictability of success and failure that currently correlates with any social or cultural factor. A student should not be successful or should not fail based on how much education or formal education their parents have, or what their household looks like, or how much money their parent or guardian is making. All of these things are not dependent on a student being successful or experiencing any type of failure. So getting rid of that, so making sure that all students, regardless of what their out of school situation is, have an equal opportunity and have all of the tools and resources to be equally successful. Naturally, everyone is not going to be equal. Some people, based on their work ethic, based on their motivation and engagement, will be more successful than others. However, making sure that they all have an equal opportunity to be as successful as possible is the key here. And then finally, making sure we interrupt inequitable practices, challenging biases, and creating inclusive school environments for all. So once we identify these inequalities and these inequities, making sure that we take action. So don't just kind of turn a cold shoulder and say, okay, well, I know that this can kind of be going on, but that's in a different classroom, and I don't experience that on my own, so I'm just going to kind of ignore it. This is a systemic issue. This is something that's much larger and much more significant than just one teacher and even one school. This is a system that we're here because of systemic results. These are not things that one person ruined. This is a larger, wider scale issue that is going to really take a whole community to correct over time. It can't be done or it can't be undone in one day. And so it wasn't done in one day, so it can't be undone in one day. So it's going to take some time, and it's going to take a lot of effort. Some things do get in the way. I will tell you now, it's not going to be an easy process. It's never been. So there's a gap between our intention for a quality education for every child and the actions that we take and conditions we provide that prevent students from succeeding to their full potential. So yes, we don't want to see any of our students fail. We have good intentions, but the actions that we take and the system that's in place and the policies that are implemented are not always congruent to student success. I'm going to go back to that achievement gap that I mentioned earlier. It's present and it's growing. So every year, this achievement gap kind of gets wider and wider. So this is something that's definitely getting in the way. And then we have some implicit bias. So this is going to be something that we're going to focus on quite a bit today as well. Implicit biases are biases that we have within us, some of which we may be aware of, some of which we may not be aware of. So today, we're going to look at implicit biases, and then you guys are going to take a look at yourselves and kind of do some self-reflection and identify what implicit bias you may have. So first of all, implicit bias is defined as the mental process that creates unconscious associations and attitudes towards people and groups of people based on characteristics such as race, ethnicity, gender, age, appearance, and sexual orientation.